We have plenty to discuss here in tonight's video, including all kinds of NHL trade talk around a variety of NHL teams. One, we're looking at the Montreal Canadiens and an interesting topic of conversation brought up on our Habs podcast, looking at would they trade their top goalie prospect if it meant landing a top six center. We'll discuss how that could play out and what our thoughts are on that possibility. Plus, what are the latest around the Nashville Predators and Luke Evangelista? Could that be one of the main RFA situations that leads to a trade? We're going to look at the Dallas Stars and a predicament they might be in after this year, might be forced to trade one of their top stars. We'll have a look at that situation as well. Plus, we also have some goaltending options for the Edmonton Oilers. A couple of names to watch according to Jeff Merrick. And also another name to watch according to some could be Carter Hart. We'll discuss what we might see here in the coming weeks and if he could actually return to the NHL for the coming season. A lot more coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have lots to discuss here in today's video. We're going to kick things off with some updates here from the 2 Months podcast based out of Alberta and some interesting information on former Flyers goaltender Carter Hart. Now, I know Carter Hart, along with his teammates that just completed going through a trial, are names that are kind of, I think we can label them as sensitive topics, if you will. But they are attempting, regardless of what everybody's thoughts or feelings are about if they should or will, or what everybody's thoughts are. I know there's a variety of opinions out there. Some think that they were found not guilty, so they should have every right to return. Other people feel that they shouldn't, and everybody's entitled to their own opinions, and we're not here to get into tonight on whether they should or should not be returning. Regardless of what our thoughts and feelings are on that particular topic, fact of the matter is these players are going to be attempting to resume their careers. They're going to want to be able to do that, and Carter Hart is the biggest name amongst that group of players that just went through this process. Now, the information coming from this podcast has been pretty reliable on a variety of topics, especially a lot of stuff related to the Edmonton Oilers. So we'll take this as fairly reliable. And they say that they've talked with other NHL players in Alberta that have been training with Hart, and that right now they're saying he looks pretty good considering he hasn't played an NHL game in an extended time, that he's very focused on a return, and that he seems convinced that he can make it back and help a team win games and hopefully be very successful. They said the goalie mechanics look good as well. Again, considering the long layoff and lack of NHL action for the last couple of years, obviously, that's something that you would kind of expect him to have to be working on. A lot of these guys are going to have to go through a lot of training, I would think, if they're able to resume their NHL careers. Now, of course, like I said, he hasn't played an extended time, and we still don't know 100% if the NHL is going to let them return. But there is belief, according to these guys, that there is going to be some sort of announcement, likely in the next couple of weeks, that will kind of outline a potential path to a return for Hart. I'm not sure about the other guys. I would suspect it would be a similar path for all of them, but I don't know that for certain. Obviously, the NHL and Gary Bettman can make their choice and decide if if they're going to be able to return, and if they need to do anything to make it back, what that is, and all that kind of stuff. But we've seen the NHL obviously bring back other people that have been through legal battles or other tough issues, and obviously we'll see where things go. Like I said, this is not a topic I'm giving an opinion on, or like I said, I know there's a lot of mixed opinions out there. It just is really just about whether or not he can actually make it back. So they think there's going to be an announcement here in a few weeks that'll kind of outline an opportunity and a path for him to possibly bring back a return. And that the other players that they've been talking to have all been saying that if he's able to return, that any of their teams that they play on would welcome him with open arms, and he'd be accepted and welcomed back without any issues. Now, they also said that there's at least 4 teams that they're aware of that would bring him back on, at the very least, a PTO, maybe even offer a contract. You never know. There was a lot of already rumblings around this player, more than any of the other guys involved in that situation, as soon as the trial was finished and the verdict was announced. I do think that he would be the player amongst that group that would generate the most interest. Now, a team like Edmonton, we do know that their goaltending situation is questionable. We've heard lots of rumblings and rumors around them wanting to have a different tandem going into next year. And if they have to start the season with the current tandem, that maybe it's a scenario where they don't go into the playoffs with the current tandem, and then maybe there's changes throughout the season. That's difficult to say for sure, but there seemed to be a lot of interest within the team to change things up and then not do the exact same thing with the exact same guys here yet again. So we will see. I mean, to be honest, I know it says 4 teams could be a landing spot, and you know that there's going to be teams that are going to be interested in some of these players. Like I said, out of all of them, Hart was probably the guy with the strongest skill set, had the strongest chance of being a impact player. Of course, this was looking back at all of their results and all of their history prior to everything going down to them, obviously taking time away from the NHL to deal with the lawsuit. I think he probably had the strongest career. Now, obviously, the goalie situation can be tough as well, and it's certainly, his numbers were kind of up and down. I don't know that he's going to be a savior to anybody if he's allowed back in the league, but certainly it's going to be a very interesting situation to watch. And there was rumors right off the bat, as soon as the trial ended, about Edmonton. And it would not be shocking to me because the Oilers have been one of those teams that have taken on a variety of other personnel that have come from situations where you wondered if they were going to be accepted back. You've obviously look at Stan Bowman, the GM, prime example. We've seen Evander Kane go through stuff. Now this is a very unique set of circumstances. We haven't seen anybody on trial for this type of thing either. So it's a whole different situation. But according, I would think that NHL players that these guys are talking to would have a good grasp on where things are at and how people around the league kind of feel about things. So anyways, the moral of the story here is don't be shocked if Carter Hart is given a path to return and that there's going to be teams that want to bring him back. So I guess, like I said, you can leave your comments about whether he should or he shouldn't. That's not the part that we're debating here today. It's just the fact that there's lots of interest, and there seems to be, from a player's perspective, teams and players that would welcome and accept him back, and that it's looking more likely that could happen. But of course, like I said, we don't really know what the league's position is on this. They've said very little to nothing publicly. So besides the fact that they haven't been reinstated. So like I said, are they going to be given, a path or what? But if they are, it's probably going to happen. So we'll see with that. Now, of course, I know with comes the Oilers, like I said, they seem to be the main team linked to him. I haven't heard other teams' names mentioned. However, 4 teams, I'm sure I wouldn't be shocked if it turns out to be more, if it becomes public that he's able to return. But I know Jeff Merrick made an appearance on the Empty Netters podcast. He was talking about the Oilers' goaltending situation. Again, he mentioned some younger goalies that he feels that they could be looking into, that they might be able to get, either as a waiver claim or as a trade that's not going to cost too much early in the season or even in training camp, which would be Michael DiPietro out of Boston and Nico Dawes in New Jersey, because they're both goaltenders. I think that if they end up on waivers, because they would be the team's third goalie with their current franchise, and if they end up staying with those teams to be the third goalie, like they're going to have to go to the minors, which means waivers, and the odds of them getting picked up are much higher than a lot of other guys. They would be some of the top names that would be more likely to get grabbed on waivers. So, a trade may materialize so that they don't lose them for nothing. So, again, those are a couple other names to watch. And whether it's Edmonton or somebody else, they're definitely names that I would suspect, especially Dawes, where they've got Markstrom and Allen now locked up long-term. Like, his path is blocked to the NHL. So from any kind of regular basis and regularity. So I suspect he'll be a player that's traded this year. DiPietro, on the other hand, we've heard rumblings about Boston exploring the market to maybe trade Korpisalo. And so I could see, or maybe they do that instead, and maybe DiPietro gets a path to the NHL. But so Boston might be a little bit more likely to kind of take their time and explore things, but we will see where that goes. But lots of goaltending talk here, of course, in today's video. Another quick update as well. I know Evgeny Kuznetsov, the veteran centerman, who we mostly know during his time with the Washington Capitals, and of course played a little bit with the Carolina Hurricanes before going to the KHL, was rumored to be looking to make an NHL return. I've seen some reports here in the last 24 hours suggesting that he may have re-signed into KHL. That doesn't appear to be the case, at least not as of yet. The current reports indicate that he is still indeed looking for an NHL deal and still wants to make an NHL return. Considering where we're at in the summer, though, I would suspect that the odds of that happening are getting slimmer by the day. Maybe he goes on a PTO, but if he's looking for a firm, solid contract, I'm not sure he's going to get that. There was a lot of speculation earlier in the summer that maybe he would, but nothing has come together that at least that he's accepted so far. So we will see where that goes on that front. Now, another team I want to talk about today as well is the Dallas Stars. Some interesting updates there, looking at a couple of big names, and this was something that Jeff Merrick was talking about as well. The Dallas Stars cap situation is interesting. If you take a look at what they did this past offseason earlier this summer, they had to cut some players. Basically, they had to move some money out to be able to make everything work. Of course, they got the big rant-in trade that took place at the deadline. There was a lot of rumblings about Jason Robertson, and really, he's still a player that's his future is questionable, you could say. Looking at their situation right now for the current upcoming year, 25-26, their cap is very, very, very tight. There's not much wiggle room. And if you're looking ahead to next year, it may look a little bit more flexible, but it's really not as flexible as it looks. Like if you look ahead for right now, they've got 15 players under contract next year, and it shows them with around $27 million in cap space. But $27 million, when you have two massive extensions to possibly do, could get eaten up really quickly. You're looking at Thomas Harley on the back end, Jason Robertson up front. Robertson could probably easily ask for double digits in the millions for sure. So, if I'm not sure what his number is going to be, but I'm suspecting it's more than 10. And Harley is probably, at least suspect, the Stars are probably looking to keep him either at or below Heiskanen, I would suspect, given that he's making $8.45 million and has pretty well been their top defenseman. But I think you could probably say that Harley was is right there with them, right, for being arguably, right up there with them as a 1-2. So, when the cap situation has changed a fair bit since Heiskanen has signed that contract. So could Harley ask for more money than what Heiskanen's getting? It's possible. It's very possible. Of course, now Dallas, of course, a no-tax state. They do have a slight advantage that way, that they might be able to keep his number down a little bit in that sense. But, looking at the year that Harley had last year, and looking at as well, the fact that he get to go for Team Canada to Four Nations, he's in contention for the Olympic team. Like, this guy's value has just skyrocketed in the past year. So, between these two guys, if let's say that they're both double-digit guys, you could have $19-20 million tied up amongst these two players. And then it would only leave you with $7 million to sign like another 6-7 players. So it's not completely, a for sure kind of deal that they would have to move one of them or that they can't afford both. But it makes their situation extremely tight if they do. So obviously it doesn't mean that they can't sign them. But really going to boil down to what the numbers are. If they can get them on team-friendly friendly enough team deals, then obviously that will certainly help. But if you're looking around the NHL and what some of the other wingers are going to be getting this offseason, or for some of the big extensions that are coming, look like Marner just signed, obviously, in Vegas, comparable, no tax state. What did he end up getting? Was it 12.5 or something like that? And then you got the Kaprizov contract coming up. Robertson, then of course there's Rantanen. So, Robertson's probably going to be looking for something pretty similar to that. So, for him to get at least 11 or 11.5, maybe close to 12, that's not completely unreasonable. He's had 40 goal season, 100 point season, 80 point season. There's lots on his resume that's, makes him a pretty valuable piece there. So, and then of course, like I said, the Harley, for them to take up $20 million. So it's just going to be challenging for both of them to get these contract extensions done without shedding some other money. So we already know they kind of evaluated the market on Robertson earlier, and that could be another tipping point. They may not. I would suspect if they felt like they had to move one, if they didn't want to have that many big long-term deals, that Harley would get preference here because they have a lot of other forwards, like, you know, especially after the Rantanen trade, making the longer-term big money, whereas, you know, you don't have as many defensemen and you really can't afford to lose Harley on that decor. So we'll see what Dallas does, but it's an interesting situation to see how things play out this year. In Nashville as well, I know Luke Fox I believe he was on a Vancouver podcast, or I think it was Sekeres and Price he was on, talking about some of the unsigned restricted free agents, mentions Luke Evangelista of Nashville maybe being the one RFA that he would most likely think had a better shot at being traded, given the fact that they've had a really tough time agreeing on term. And with Nashville's season, the way things went last year and then where they bottomed out, we know that the Nashville Predators are a team that are probably more likely and more willing to shake things up than some of the other teams that have unsigned RFAs at this point, like the Flames, the Ducks, for example. Obviously a lot of their long-term big money deals and their veteran guys are really tough to be moved. And in some cases, it's just almost impossible. So trading some of their younger talent, as much as that might seem counterproductive, has been the best way to shake things up and bring in some new, different types of players. So we'll have to keep an eye on the Evangelista situation in Nashville. If Fox is onto something here, then perhaps he might be the main guy that could actually end up getting dealt here after all. Another interesting topic as well. Montreal, another podcast here with Tony Marinaro talking to Brian Wild. And they were talking about a question about should the Montreal Canadiens get another solid year out of Samuel Montembeault if he can be a top 10 goalie in the NHL and kind of solidify himself that he can be that starting goaltender, that number one goalie, and kind of hold that spot down because he's not that old, right? He still would have a lot of decent years left if he can solidify his career here and can continue, what he's been able to accomplish the last couple of years. That if he can really, have another season and they're like, okay, do they consider trading Jacob Fowler to really get another top six centerman? Because obviously that number two center spot's a big hole in their lineup. A lot of uncertainty around Kirby Dach. And that's the question that was posed on the podcast. I believe it was a fan question. And Brian Wild, without hesitation at all, says absolutely yes, he would. He would trade Fowler to get, especially if it were like somebody like, he didn't use the name if it were Sam Bennett, but like a Sam Bennett type, a number two centerman. Tony, I believe, kind of felt differently here, but he absolutely would have done it. He said goalies are hard to predict. There's a lot of, great goalies that come out of college, come out of junior, and they look like they're going to be phenomenal future number one starting goaltenders. And then a higher percentage of them kind of, not necessarily flop, but don't turn out to be what you think they're going to be. The values are hard to peg. Like they would never would have thought trading Jake Allen, they only got, a third rounder back. He said between the value, not holding, they're super hard to predict. The development takes the longest and can be the trickiest amongst all positions. And, he felt that if he gets the right player coming back to help their top six right away, and it can be a big part of their team for a long time, that he would do it in a heartbeat. Now, I would be a lot more cautious with that. Jacob Fowler right now does appear to be, I think, of all the goalies they've had in their system. Like I know Primo looked really good for a while, and a lot of people thought he could be the guy. And I understand that he's not wrong in a sense that goalies are super hard to predict, and they are a unique development situation that sometimes, you see teams giving up on them by the time they're 22, 23, and then by the time they're 25, 26, they're on another team and they're kind of having a lot more success. That does happen a decent amount of time. Now, they don't always go on to become starting goaltenders and star players, but they do sometimes. They are tricky, and they are the toughest probably position that that you see them spend more time in the minors, more time developing, and the value can drop. Like if you wait too long to move a prospect goaltender, by the time you're ready to give up on them and move them, the value is usually gone. So it's tough to do. But look at like the value that the Predators got out of a scare-off to the Sharks. I mean, it wasn't exactly mind-blowing, right? So, and he was a pretty good prospect goalie as well. So I'm not sure that they're going to be able to use Fowler to get the player they'd want. But, I mean, if that were on the table, I would still be hesitant. Of all the goalies they've had in their systems here in recent number of years, he does look like he has the most potential, the highest potential to be that star goalie. Like, really, if you look back, since they unfortunately had to part ways with Patrick Roy, they've had some good goalies, don't get me wrong, but they haven't, I don't know, I guess they've had some brief runs, like Jose Theodore had a few years there where he was pretty amazing, but obviously did a lot of good things, but didn't have the longevity, right? You just don't know. You don't want to trade the guy and have him be that number one star-studded goaltender on another team for 10 to 12, 15 years, right? So I would be hesitant. Now, to me, if I thought they were like one piece away from winning a Stanley Cup, and they really thought this player that they could get by trading Fowler would put them over the top, and they were in a cup window, and they were like, okay, we really think this is our time. Doing this trade, we're going to be, right there. They're going to do what we've seen Florida or Edmonton do in the last couple of years. Then I'd be like, okay, maybe if you can win a cup or two out of it, even if he goes on to be a star player somewhere else, at least you can kind of live with yourself a little bit more. Like, yeah, okay, that's hurt a little bit on a long-term basis, but we got a cup or two out of it. We're quite content with the fact that we won now. Whereas he may win later somewhere else. He may never win. He may have a good career. You don't know, but at least it's a little bit easier to swallow when it's the fact that you won. So clearly, I don't think they're in that situation right now, so I would be patient. I mean, we've seen the team get into the playoffs for the first time, and after going through this, fairly short rebuild, really, they were able to accelerate their rebuild and move it along a little quicker than some teams for sure. And they are further along. If you look at what other teams have been through here recently with the same sort of concept, they're in a good spot. They've drafted well. They made some good trades, but they're not in a spot where the cup window is opening. Like, we're not going to go from getting into the playoffs with a negative 20 goal differential. It's qualifying basically right at the very last game right at the end of the season to, we're going to win the Stanley Cup. Like, it's maybe someday, but you're not there today. So I would be very cautious not to do that deal. They have plenty of other prospects, picks, or roster pieces that I would think that you could put in a package to gain that player that you don't have to move Fowler. In my opinion, I think there's plenty of other interesting kids on that team that could be included, as well as some younger, you're looking at, because obviously if you don't feel Doc is working out to be that guy, you could consider including him. You could consider including Alex Newhook, right? Because he would have to play lower in the lineup if he remains a Hab long term. I'd still wonder about Laine long term as well. Is he going to be? Because to me, he has to be a top six guy playing on the power play. And if you're confident he can play that role, and you don't have guys that are going to be playing ahead of him, but like if you really like Zachary Bolduc and he really turns out to be a second line player, you're going to have more than enough capable guys that can play in the top six. So that's going to create some challenges too, right? Not all guys can play in the bottom six or play in a different role and be successful. So you have to look at your mix that way. So I don't know. I think they have plenty of other options. I would not do that type of trade, but I'd love to know what you think in the comments. Would you trade the top prospect goalie that this team has had in a long time for a number two center today? Or do you think it's best to hold off and go another route? Let me know your thoughts on today's news and rumors in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, of course, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I will catch you next time.